Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Soaring Profits. We're here today talking to you about gun violence and gun regulation. My name is Patrick. As always, I have my special co-host with me today. Wave to the people.
James. I wish I could, but my arms don't work. Speaking of gun control and bearing arms, I bear no arms. But it's okay. We're working on the tech, and we figure my arms will just kind of kick in. So if they start playing around, you'll know why. This
That was
metaverse is incredible.
The best possible entry into this whole conversation than we ever could have possibly put together.
Probably the best. Yeah.
Fantastic. I cannot bear arms. Yeah. So a little bit before we get into this, the preamble, all of this world that we're around right now is the metaverse provided by Facebook. Meta, right? The new name and new face of Facebook. And we're sitting here with Oculus headsets on, and we're able to touch and feel and see everything within our world right now, right? But obviously, sometimes we don't have hands or we don't have arms or we have, tech bubble issues. So that's where we are today. But we still want to bring you the same discussion. And I think it's hilarious that was our introduction. And I love it. I think that was fantastic. So genuine, and that's just kind of where this all came from. So we were talking earlier about some topics, and I think there's a whole disparity between people and the gun safety, gun violence, and gun regulation aspect. And James and I are slightly different on the political viewpoints of this. I'm pretty anti-regulation. I come from a law enforcement background. I had some law enforcement in my background, and I've seen some of the policies and what that looked like. Where we are, we have what's called a gun registration. We had a long gun registration. And what the concept of that was is that it provided a database for law enforcement officers to be able to articulate who and what and where weapons were when they would show for duty. They'd get a call. They knew that there was a shotgun. They knew that there was a long gun. They knew that there was a rifle. They knew these things. The problem was it became an increasing tax on the population, as well as people just didn't register their guns, right? And my opinion is that bad guys that are breaking the law, they don't register their guns. That's part of being a bad guy. You don't follow the rules. So who do these laws affect? So
But if we were, not that I have hands here, I'm moving my hands. But if we were to regulate it, like they said, like with the registry, like we register them when they're sold, we register when they come in and out. And I realize that guns come in under the wire and we don't know that they're there, but they also come in the positive way. So when they get stolen from someone's farm or someone's house, at least they're registered and we know where they are, where they came from, and we can track them in some way. And, it can lead us to a possible person who has committed the crime. It also, you're more protected because if your gun is registered to you and it's gone missing and you tell them right away, when that gun shows up, you'll be protected a little bit.
You mean like from a liability perspective?
From a liability perspective, yeah. Yeah.
So if somebody came and stole a shotgun out of your safe, right?
That's right.
And
that's been registered,
and you said,
and I immediately call and go,
right,
my registered shotgun has gone missing. And then 2 days later, it blows away someone.
Right.
Then at least it was registered. At least I had the common sense to mention that it was stolen. I've proven that I don't have it anymore. So now when the crime's committed, it's gone, right? You're not liable for that.
Okay,
that's what I think.
But yeah, if you go back in history and we look at the United States and we go back to the Second Amendment, and I don't think you can have a North American gun control conversation without talking about the Second Amendment and the concept of why it was established, the purpose for its implementation, and why it remains. I think there's 3 facets of what that is. So the initial, when we were doing you were probably around, you were old enough, but
I helped sign it. Like I didn't actually sign it, but what I did is I ran it from person to person.
Right. Well, so you just had JP on the bottom is how you just.
Well, if you look closely, you'll see a little JP. Yeah, absolutely.
Little corner ripped off.
Corner. Yeah.
So, anyways, the Constitution of the United States, the First Amendment is the freedom of speech, right? So, this world that we're living in right now, and we're able to have this conversation and all the crazy shit that we come up with on a daily basis.
We're pretty ludicrous,
right? But we're protected under the Constitution of that doctrine, right? The Second Amendment on the Constitution was the right to bear arms. And there's kind of a joke, but kind of the way it worked is that when the First Amendment fails, the Second Amendment's there to back it up. So if your freedom of speech is being compelled or discriminated against or suppressed, then you have the right to bear arms, not like James here, but you have the right to bear arms and protect yourself and, obstruct against a tyrannical force. And that was the founding doctrines of the United States, but I would even argue to a greater extent the North American tradition. And that's where we have to look back to why it was. And I hear the argument all the time, and I'm sure you'll bring it up, is that, well, those were for muskets, right? You had a guy with a one shot. I can even load it because I can bear arms. Pour. Right?
Oh, good. Now
that's pretty good.
Know how to load a musket.
That was it.
Yeah, no, actually, I think I really do think that whole theory of, it was muskets, so it doesn't apply. I'm not saying the Second Amendment doesn't apply. I'm not disagreeing that it is okay for.
Well, that was a great topic, folks. Thank you, folks, for joining us. It looks like I've won again. Conservatism for the win. And good
Let me finish here. What I'm saying is that I don't think that we should blanket that for all guns. Like, I think there are certain guns that we should allow. They should be regulated. We should know who has them. I can't see a reason why you wouldn't, as an honest person who doesn't feel like they'll ever commit a crime, why you wouldn't want to register, why you wouldn't want people to know, like the police or the law enforcement, to know where your guns are. I get what you're saying. I think a little bit of your worry is if the government took away your freedoms and decided that you weren't allowed to do something, and you wanted to go against that, then if they knew where all the weapons were, they could just come in and take them. Right. I think that's a fear of the past. I don't think that we have that fear right now. I think
really,
I really do. So I think we have laws in place right now. I think we have structures in place right now. I think you're right. Freedom of speech, even now, like freedom of speech is getting. I find it's being infringed upon a little bit. But we have ways to fight that. We can go to court. We can go to Supreme Courts. We can hire lawyers. We can do class actions to counteract that. If someone tells me that I can no longer talk about homosexuality or even gun rights, they say I'm not allowed to talk about gun rights anymore, I can go to courts for that. But for me to pick up a gun because they've told me I can't just talk about gun rights, I just don't think that's going to happen here. Like, I know in other countries it does. And I
think that. I think that where you're coming from is, a very liberal view, and I can appreciate that. I think fundamentally, though, is that we have seen an eroding of the structure of law when it comes to rights of free speech, rights of minority, rights of even majority. For us here, we just went through a legal process here in Canada where we were under martial law. We had an unbelievable process of law that went into at the beginning of March with Justin Trudeau and the trucker situation, in which gave government massive overreach. Right here in Canada, we don't have a gun situation that's nearly to the level that the United States does. We don't have the violent crime to the same level. And it's kind of what came first, the chicken or the egg, the cart or the horse. But I believe that the two countries were founded somewhat differently, right? The United States is founded in a little bit more, I'm not going to say systemic violence, but their justice system, judicial system, the wild, wild west was done a little bit differently. Whereas here in Canada, we just went through this extreme legal process where I would argue if we were going to see a bunch of Canadians get really pissed off and grab their guns, we should have and potentially would have. I think if this happened in the United States, they would have rioted and overthrown the government. I think 100%.
I don't think at all. Like, so I am not for or against what the truckers were standing for. Like, COVID was a thing, and we needed to deal with that, and the government tried their best. And I'm not for Justin Trudeau. You can go back and see that video. But I don't think we were in a situation where they were allowed up until when Trudeau made the stupidity error. The government allowed them to protest, allowed them to have their say, allowed people to hear them. Uh, so I don't think their rights were necessarily infringed upon until Justin Trudeau
Until they were.
until they were.
Right.
So I see that, but then do you really think it would have solved problems if those the people who had in the trucks had guns? How would that solve a problem except the people would be dead and they would be less popular? Because then they would be killing police. They would be making the streets of Ottawa unsafe. Children would have died. Business owners would have died. It would have made a very difficult and tricky situation way worse if you added guns to that. What it would have done is made it into a war situation, whereas right now what we have is a legal situation. Yes, people were arrested. Yes, the protest was stopped. And I feel illegally stopped. I'm a firm believer that it shouldn't have been stopped in the way it was. But now those people that, some of them were put in jail, not for very long. They have
some are still in custody. That's been
some are still in custody, depending on what happened or what they did or what it is. And they're getting their day in court. And I'm sure that the people that are behind the truckers will go for those law changing things and say that their rights were infringed upon, because that's why we have laws.
Right.
But
I think the issue
what would have
that
happened if the people in the trucks picked up their guns and started shooting the police, or started in the middle of a major city, started a war? You're suggesting that is a good thing just because their rights were infringed upon, just because they can't move forward and say that, I don't want to wear a mask. I want to be able to go wherever I want. I get that. Those are important things. But do you think that adding guns to that situation would have changed the outcome in any way?
What I'm saying is, and what I'm promoting and alluding to in this whole statement is that if they had guns, they would have never had to fight for their rights in the first place. It would have been a much different handling of the entire COVID situation. And like we saw in the States, the United States was very segmented in their approaches to COVID. And that's another topic for a conversation that we'll have some other day. But the response that occurred in California and New York and Seattle, Washington, was very different than the response that we saw in Florida and in Alabama and in North Dakota, right? And a lot of these places, when you realize that every truck that you pull over on the highway has got a gun rack behind them, you handle that stop differently. You handle that enforcement of COVID policies very different. So when Canada decided that they were going to shut down the nation, because we were shut down, there was points where essential workers were given letters stating that they were free to travel. That's crazy.
But Canada didn't shut down the nation. Trudeau did not shut down the nation. Trudeau suggested that it be shut down. No, he didn't shut it down. It was done by province, much like the states did. It's just that our provinces decided to shut them down. It wasn't Trudeau who did that. Trudeau did very little, in fact.
Which province was open?
There were no provinces open, but the provinces decided. Like in our province, Doug Ford decided. In PEI, that premier decided. It had nothing to do with Trudeau, other than he suggested it firmly or something.
But who directed policy? The policy was done through the Canadian Medical Establishment. That was by I'm blanking her name. She was
actually in Ford's case. He was led by the medical team that he had beside him.
Correct.
That's the reason. That's why our laws and the way we handled it, unlike Quebec was far stricter. There was a bubble in the Atlantic where 3 provinces didn't let anybody in or out. It was all handled differently, much like the states that you're talking about.
But what I'm saying is that here in Canada,
way quicker.
Was there a state in the United States that you were not allowed to travel into that state? No. Was there a state that shut down interstate commerce? No. The COVID in the United States, and for people at home, if you're a United States citizen or you're a Canadian citizen, the United States handled it way better as far as citizenry and rights than I would argue anywhere else in the entire world. That's my opinion. I believe they handled it well. You have Australia, again, common law, crown country.
Okay.
Where they were
Do they have gun laws?
They literally just redid their gun laws 2 years before this, where they ended up doing a massive gun buybacks. Where
Why?
Why? You know, you can get really crazy here, but you can say that they knew maybe something was coming. When you start locking your citizenry down,
could it have been that they had mass shootings after mass shootings after mass shootings?
Do you think Australia has more mass shootings than other countries?
No, but they handled the situation because they had mass shootings. They had a couple of big mass shootings and then decided, and rightly so, we're going to take off some guns off the street.
But okay, so you're tying gun ownership, like a gun in a truck or a gun on a wall or a gun in a safe, to the same lethality of a mental health patient. Like if a mental health person decides that he wants to go and kill people, he's going to take a knife, he's going to take a bomb, he's going to, like the Unabomber decided he wanted to kill people.
If there's a gun on the wall, he's going to take a gun.
Sure.
If there's a gun in the truck, he's going to take that. Like, so in Canada, if you suffer from mental health, and we can prove that, or I believe if you just broke up with your wife, you can't go buy a gun anywhere. You just can't.
There absolutely are restrictions for that.
Right? And why wouldn't that be a thing? Why wouldn't we protect ourselves from people that we know are mentally ill?
Well, but this is the kicker, pal. This is the kicker. Is that terrified? Who gets to decide that? And at what threshold? This is the kicker. Nobody is going to disagree that mental health is a problem, and that people who have mental health problems shouldn't be allowed to own tanks and guns and nuclear weapons and goats.
Why goats?
Wow,
goats are an issue.
You get them towards a cliff, it's a mess.
I just don't want to know. Like, I've already sworn on the last one, so we were all getting demonetized. Let's not talk about goats. Yeah.
So anyways, if you're a crazy person, you shouldn't be allowed to shoot, maim, or hurt other people. There's nobody that's going to disagree with you. And that's a liberal talking point. The issue is at the core of that is who gets to decide? Who gets to decide if they're crazy? Because if it's you and you don't like me, or you don't agree with my opinion, or you aren't in the same political or the same religious, right? But that's what I'm saying, though, is that the ruling party.
No, it's if you are clinically depressed, clinically you have bipolar, clinically you have schizophrenia, clinically something is wrong with you. You have a clinical problem. You have been tested.
So you sir, my dear,
problem.
You sir are a smart and articulate gentleman.
Have a gun.
You sir are a smart, articulate gentleman, and you know the DSM. You know that 96% of the population walking around, normal, everyday, functional people, on some level could be tagged as a mental health offender, a person that shouldn't have. Then
you're not wrong.
To decide that?
You're not wrong. A clinical doctor, when a problem arises, the reason that we know that
are doctors infallible? This is the point.
The reason that we know that people have mental health problems is because a problem existed where they couldn't cope with the regular society, whether that was when they were younger and they had problems socializing with other people, or they got older and they broke the law, or they just couldn't cope. Or they just it's not a death sentence when you get clinically tested and say you have clinical depression. Well, eventually, hopefully, and it's the goal that eventually depression would end, and that you would rise above it and things would get better, and then that would come off your record. And then if you want to go get a gun, go get a gun. But I just think that if we are just going to allow everyone who walks in the door to buy a gun, no matter what, it's a bad idea. And if we're going to allow any kind of gun, that's even worse idea. And
before we get into that,
I'm just about to roll into schools.
Right.
Go ahead.
Before we get into that,
yep.
We have watched. I have friends of mine that are physicians, that are doctors, and I've had business partners that are doctors. I've had some wild and crazy experiences with these people that are viewed in our society as the most intelligent group of people. I can tell you one thing, and one thing wholly, that doctors are very good at one thing. They're not great at a lot of other things. So doctors are not great at mental health. They aren't great at business. They aren't great at a few things. But what they're really good at doing is they're really good at understanding the physical nature of ailment, right? It takes a very specialized physician, right? And a very specialized personnel to diagnose, treat, and maintain mental health.
Absolutely.
What the issue that happens though in that is who gets to dictate what mental health problem, issue, concern. Let's get crazy for a second. If you are a supporter of Donald J. Trump and you decided that January 6th was a really good idea, and you are now on a government watch list, or you go and see a psychiatrist, or even let's say you're even arrested, at that event, okay? Or should you ever be allowed to have a gun again? And who gets to decide?
Did you commit a crime that was violent?
No, I'm saying that, okay, if you believe in Donald
did
J.
you commit
Trump,
did you commit a crime that was violent? Did
I'm
you
just
violently
nothing,
smash and break and enter?
no,
Did you have a
nothing
weapon
about what
with
I
you
just
when it happened?
nothing about what I just
that's what we're talking
indicated.
about. Did any of that happen?
No.
Well, then you're fine. You fight you have your day in court, and you either are arrested or you're not arrested. A judge decides whether or not you can have a gun. If you didn't commit a crime that was violent in nature, most judges, and I assume, would say that no, you're fine. You're going to be on probation for what you did. Don't break the law again. And then after your term of probation, then you move forward. And then if you can legally get a gun, you go get a gun. There's nothing wrong with restricting, making sure that the people who have the guns are going to make the right choices. I don't understand why the conservative talking point is that everyone gets to have a gun. The people that we trust, that we've chosen, that we've picked, that we have raised above. If you find someone, if you find a judge, if you find a judge that isn't doing the right job, then it is your job to go and get the people that can remove that judge. If you feel that you've been unfairly treated, there are other judges you can go to. There are other courts. There are higher courts. There is a system. It's a flawed system. We need to work on it, and we will.
We have the system, and
but
we already established it. And it's called the Second
everyone
Amendment.
In the system. I'm not arguing the Second Amendment, and that's the craziest point of the Conservative Party, is that you're saying that because I'm saying that we should know who owns the guns. That's all I'm saying. I want to know who owns the guns.
Do you think that the guns that are killing kids in the streets in Chicago and New York and Miami, do you like in Kansas City, do you think those guns are registered firearms?
I think some of them would be if
we followed the proper laws.
I think some of them would be if we followed the proper laws.
Do you think that the guys that are
how many mass shootings haven't been registered guns?
I would argue that most of them have been registered guns.
Right.
Most of them are taken out of the rack at somebody's home and taken and shot. And I think that your registration did nothing but go against and tax law-abiding gun ownership.
So in America, can you get a gun if you have Can you get a gun if you have mental health problems?
Well, but to what capacity? They have red light laws that are
no, like I can go to a gun show, grab a gun, and go, it doesn't matter who I am. I barely need a license.
Well, I think that's a bit of a liberal talking point, is that the gun show loophole, right?
Well, there's other places that you can buy a gun that it's not even a thing. Like in Canada,
I can buy
a handgun. Say in Canada, I buy a handgun.
Right.
Now I have to track wherever that is. I have a friend who has a handgun, and he has to tell the police where it is. If he wants to move it from point A to point B, it has to be a logical choice.
Right, but this is what I'm saying. This is literally a legal gun holder who's following the rules.
Okay, but there's nothing wrong with that. They need to know where handguns are. They need to know.
I'm explaining to you that the average bad guy doesn't do that. So what you're doing is you're targeting your buddy who's a law-abiding gun owner and who's going to follow that rule. The guy that's using that gun to do drugs and sell drugs and use that in a bad way that we hear about and see about, he's not calling the police, the OPP, and going, I'm traveling down the 401, going to a shooting club. Thanks, just letting you know. They're going.
So you're saying because of the bad element. So you're doing the same thing I'm doing. I'm taking the most extreme and and using that for my talking point, and that's what we do. But you're taking the opposite extreme, that all the bad guys are using. Well, they're not all using unregistered guns. It's just so easy to get a gun. Why would they need to have a registered gun? They just go in and they get it. Like it doesn't matter who you are, you can go get a gun.
But I think
States.
that's
there's nothing stopping you. Like there's
but it
people who
is
committed.
but
Just committed.
that's what I'm saying.
There's people who just committed a crime. They can go buy a gun.
So you can't buy a gun for 3 days. The day that you walk in to buy a gun, you cannot buy a gun anywhere in the United States for 3 days. That is the first thing. So if you think that you're just going to roll in, go blow your wife away that evening, it's not a thing. Second of all, there's a federal firearm checklist. The issue a lot of these situations end up coming with is that they don't end up getting the check back in a feasible time. So there's a 7-day on that check. Okay.
Thanks for arguing my point.
No. But it's not a point, but I'm aware of it, right?
Right.
But what I'm saying is that if you take the government out of it, right? You take the government out of it, and then
you just
allowing
moving your hands around because I can't. Like you're doing it a lot, a lot more than normal. I'm really feeling arm envy here. Go ahead.
That's our
That's
sign
even
off.
worse.
That's our sign off.
Yeah.
Where was I? So you end up purchasing this firearm and you bring it home. Okay. So you have a SIN number, a serial number, you have a file number, they have a file on who you are. Okay. The average mass shooter, and we're going to get into this in the next little while. I'm sure you're going to go about the AR-15 and all of this sort of thing, right?
Sure.
But the weaponry that is being used in these are these guns that come home, right? And they're being used in these shooter scenarios. And why is that? Well, it makes sense. They're kids. They're very messed up high school, college age children that end up with this armament that is handed to them and never should have been, and they should have never been able to get it. The problem is not the gun. The gun is just a tool. It's the systems around them. So it's the lack of parenting. It's the lack of supervision. It's the lack of community involvement. It's the lack of societal involvement that fosters and festers this. So the gun is like a hammer. It's a wrench. It's a screwdriver. It's a tool. The gun is a tool. And until we can take that and realize that the gun is not going to shoot anybody, the person wielding the gun is the problematic party.
Absolutely.
Then the gun being registered is no more sinister than a wrench or a screwdriver in my toolkit.
So if a gun is being registered and there's laws about how you take care of that gun, so in Canada, you have to have them locked up. Now, I know other owners, they don't have them locked up because whatever, but most good people lock up their guns, and your kid all of a sudden gets depressed and is upset, can't have access to those guns because your gun and your billets are also separated in different locations because there's laws to slow that down.
Oh, bullets. Sorry, you blipped a little there. I thought you said bullets.
Sorry. Yeah, I think I'm having serious issues with the Oculus.
Wait for me,
by the way.
Wait.
Yeah. How's this?
This is a good one tonight.
Oh my gosh. But okay, so how many shootings are there in Canada? There have been, right? There have been shootings.
Okay, so
and
has there been?
If you go
right, and we are a tenth of the population in the United States.
Sure.
If we go to the mass casualty events that the United States has versus what we have, we just kill differently. We use a van and we run down Yonge Street in Toronto. We go into École Polytechnique in Montreal.
So is a van a bullet or is it a tool?
It's a tool. There's no question. I'm not saying that we need to re-register all the vans.
But they are all registered.
No, but
not only is the van registered.
Why didn't that work?
Now that the van's registered and the person driving the van is registered.
No, but that's what I'm saying. But why? So that didn't work. So why do we need to register the next tool?
The majority of the people that are driving vans on the road, we know who they are and we know what they're doing, don't go and run over people.
The vast majority of owners that own guns do not shoot their families and children and all this sort of thing.
Right, but we have laws that protect people from that.
But do you
don't know how to drive, or if you are you drink and drive, or you're unsafe, you aren't allowed to do certain things. That's just the way it is, and that should be no different than the gun ownership.
Do you think that for 100 years of driving in Canada, Do you think that the legal system is more concerned about families being run down in the road by drunk drivers, or do you think that the insurance industry is driving liability concerns around drunk drivers?
I think
I
the
would.
government. I think that the system called MAD, which was Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, really pushed and really moved and really went and drove the government to make different laws for drunk driving. That's what I think happened.
I
I
would
think it
like
was
to know,
because
and
of
this
a
is
social
this is a
construct. I
this
think it
is a
was
take home,
a liberal movement that
right?
made drunk driving what it is
And
today.
as most liberal movements, I would challenge our viewership to look up who funds the vast majority of MAD budgets, and I would argue that it
Sure.
is the Insurance Agency of Canada.
So when
And
you have a business,
right,
Pat, when you have a business, where
are
do
you
you get
telling
your
me?
funding from?
No,
Are you going
I'm
to get your
explaining.
funding
I'm
from people
saying
that
to
are
you,
going to support what you're doing, or are you going to get your funding from people that won't support what you're doing? So
I'm
obviously,
arguing
the
that I
insurance
believe.
companies would support what you're doing, but to say that the insurance companies are the driving force behind changing the law is ridiculous.
Yep. Nope. And I'm going to give you another example for a reason why I believe that. So here in Canada, we had a texting and driving law, right,
Yes.
that was established here recently, and
Yes.
we saw it go from I think it was a $200 fine to a $250 fine to a $350 fine. Then it became points, and now it's like a $1,500 fine first offense. Like
Pretty
we're not
big,
taking
yeah.
it. Like we're
Which
not
it
taking
should
any
be.
prisoners.
People are dying.
Are people dying every day from texting and driving?
There's a lot
No,
of
no, 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 no,
accidents
no.
in
I'm
texting
asking. I'm
driving,
asking this
and
because this
yes,
is important.
people
Be-
are dying from
because
texting and driving.
what we did is we changed it from what's in Canada. We have the Highway Traffic Act, which
Right.
HTA offense, and we changed it to a criminal liability issue. Okay.
Right.
So now here you go, folks. Here's the linchpin to why these things matter is that when you have a Highway Traffic Act, your insurance company is liable for the expenditure of that accident. If I crash into Timmy with my car, I call up my insurance agent and I go, yeah, I was following too close. I should have been paying more attention. I'm going to get my fees raised, right? Oh, darn. Okay. If I'm committing a criminal offense, my insurance doesn't cover it. And what criminal offenses? We have dangerous driving, dangerous operation of a motor vehicle. We have drinking and driving, DUI, driving under the influence. We have cell phones.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you again. Do you think that the Insurance Agency of Canada is a huge part in our legal process? Absolutely, pal.
No, I think you're
Yep.
wrong. I think that it was proven that cell phones were distracting. In fact, even if you like, we've all, I'm not going to say I haven't, but other people have. You're absolutely not in charge of your giant vehicle when you have a phone in your hand. It should be a criminal offense, and that's what they proved. I don't think it has anything to do with insurance companies, but sure, I bet you insurance companies had some part in funding it because, of course, it's going to help them. Of course, then they won't have to pay. Absolutely. Why not? They would be part of it. But I'm telling you right now, the reason is because mothers and fathers and grandparents and families got together because their kid died because someone had a cell phone in their hand. I know that's the reason. And
Why
to
did it
say
take
that
so
it
much
was
longer?
just what do you mean it took so much longer? It
So
didn't take so much longer.
we went through
It
50
barely
years.
took.
We went through 50
How
years
long did it
of
take
the
for drunk
alcohol.
driving to
That's
be
what
a
I'm saying.
charge?
It took 50 years of evidence. Yet we went through.
So now
we
we
went
have
through
drunk
5
driving.
years of texting and
So
driving.
drunk
evidence.
driving already set the platform that texting jumped upon. We already had a tool, which was alcohol, that killed people when you drove behind a car. Texting was proven to be way worse. So therefore, we already had laws that already
You think
stipulated
texting and
it.
driving is worse than drinking and driving?
Absolutely. 100%. I've seen it. I've seen I think that a drunk person has more care of a car than someone texting. Absolutely. You have no reaction time when you're texting. None. You don't even know what's going on around you. Nothing. You see a screen and words. That's it. It is ridiculous to think otherwise. When you're drunk, at least you might be aware that there's people around you. I don't know. How did we get here? Sorry, folks. Gun control.
Where's your guns?
Where's your gun? So I think what you were trying to get at is that people are, when they make restrictive laws that you don't agree with, that you should be able to band together with your brethrens. Where's your red hat today? Is it? Oh.
Wow.
with your brother.
Wow.
Shots
Wow.
fired.
Wow.
Shots fired.
He's got no hands, but here we
I got
are.
no hands, but
He's
here we
throwing
are.
punches. Yeah.
Throwing punches. No, but when you get together with, like with your whatever groups that disagree, like Black Lives Matter, what if they all picked up guns, which some of them did, and when
No, they
did,
burned
what
down the
happened?
cities. It was very different.
But what happened when they brought guns into it?
They got shot.
People got shot. People
Right.
died.
No, the cops came in and shot them, and then the cops were all fired and shit.
But other people were shot too. Like it wasn't just police officers. Like I think you're just trying to make a joke. But
Yeah,
I think when we don't control the guns, we don't control
the people.
We don't control.
No, you don't control the
safety of the people. We don't
Right.
control the safety.
But so safety is
I think that you have the right. You absolutely have the right to bear arms. You absolutely have the right to have arms. But if you're suffering from mental health, you have a criminal record that prohibits you from having a firearm. You are under the certain age. There's no reason for you to have a gun, and I think that there should be laws about proper storage.
So you are setting up a societal framework that structurally allows someone arbitrarily to come in and dictate that you have a mental health condition, are under the age. No, you can go and fight and die on a hill in Normandy, France for your country, but you can't have a beer, and you can't. What I'm saying is that
before you're 18, you can't go to war either.
No, but can you go fishing
before you're 18?
Sure.
Yes.
Why can't you go
Absolutely.
Hunting? Why can't you go shooting? Why can't you do this sort of thing?
Because it's dangerous.
Like it's our white, it's our white. I'm not even white privilege. It's liberal privilege
because your brain hasn't developed enough to handle such a situation.
I would argue
make proper choices, because a man under the age of 18 or older sometimes gets a little heated and can make a rash decision. How many rash decisions did you make when you were younger?
I would argue that you are playing to the lowest common denominator in society. Again, a liberal talking point that often is for everything. But however, that liberal talking point is saying that people need to be babysat. And therefore,
meanwhile, you're on the other side saying that the government is only there to trying to control us. They want to take our guns. They want to stop us from having freedom of speech and freedom of rights, and they're going to take everything away. That isn't the case. It hasn't happened.
I would argue that we have seen it, like especially here in Canada, we have seen it.
We have rights. We're talking about them right now. We're having freedom of speech. We have freedom of religion. We have freedom of choice.
Okay, so on this platform,
of freedoms, we have YouTube, freedom of movement. We have freedom.
But that's what I'm point. That was my point. Go back in February in Canada.
No, but there was a reason behind that. People were dying. People were getting very sick. There were people dying from COVID. There were people in the hospital from COVID. They were trying to restrict the amount of people that were in the hospital. They were trying to keep them safe.
Did it work?
Yes, it did. There were less people in the hospital at the same time. So yes, it did work.
A topic for another day.
Absolutely a topic for another day. Because
we could go forever.
Just explode. His head will just blow up. Yeah,
I've seen it. I've been too many places. I've seen it. COVID in Canada, especially, and I'll talk only to COVID in Canada.
I think our problem here is they were government way off topic.
No, but it goes back to the same thing. It's massive government overreach, and that's where we are with the gun situation. That's where we are with COVID. That goes back to.
So you're saying that if we all had guns, COVID wouldn't have been a thing?
I think that proven nations around the world that have gun restrictions that are less, we did not see the severity of COVID lockdown restrictions like other nations.
But we saw more deaths.
I don't believe that.
We saw more people in the hospital. We saw hospitals overwhelmed. We saw other countries have to build extra like bomb shelters so they could house the sick people. We saw that. Did we see that in Canada?
Did you see in the United States where they were going into arenas and blowing out arenas and putting in hospitals in New York?
Guns. I don't understand.
I'm saying it never happened. It never happened. They didn't do it.
But it did. They had a lot of people sick in certain parts.
A lot of people sick is in the hospital.
They had a lot of people that were in the hospital that needed serious care that were overwhelming hospitals. It happened. You can't tell me it didn't happen.
I'm
We
not
know what
saying.
happened.
I'm not saying that COVID wasn't
therefore,
problematic. The world has been a
is
problematic thing.
But it didn't happen in Canada. We didn't have the overwhelmed nature of
Absolutely
it.
did.
We
Absolutely
didn't have
did.
the
How did we
overwhelmed
not?
hospitals.
You weren't in a hospital during all this, I suppose, but we were told going in there that they were absolutely locked, like they were to their exploding point. So I would agree with you that being in hospitals, being through the process with my family, with sick people over the last year and a half, 2 years, I walked into hospitals and I saw the chaos that was in there, and it wasn't the chaos that was being reported. I can tell you firsthand, that's my personal opinion, that what was being reported wasn't happening.
City.
No, all over.
And in Toronto.
I was in hospital. Yeah, exactly. Where do you think that hospitals would be busy? Like our biggest centers, right? So what I'm saying is that these hospitals were seeing COVID cases. They weren't seeing the craziness that was being reported. When you've got a death tally and how many cases and how many dead and how many, the fear.
So how did guns change that is what I'm saying.
Because in the United States, they said, no, we're done. And the places that, and they could do that because their government in the States has a slightly different capacity than ours
because theirs was, they had decided upon a case by case level and in their areas, depending on their government, whether or not they wanted to do it, much like we did here.
But we didn't do the same thing.
Our governments decided to do it differently.
But we didn't do the same thing.
Medical system. It had nothing to do with guns. It didn't make any sense.
I think it did. I 100% think it did. I think that if you lived in Seattle or if you lived in New York, your lifestyle of COVID for the last 2 years has been exponentially
you don't think people
different.
In New York had guns?
To nowhere near the same capacity that someone in Arizona or Alabama does.
So the people in New York that had guns didn't rise up.
The people in New York that had guns didn't rise up.
So if they didn't want to have the restrictions.
You're not catching this. These are the most restrictive states in the union. What you're saying is you're not seeing the capacity for firearm acquisition in New York and California like in these other states. You're blurring over that. And I'm saying that the acquisition, the potential to go out and buy short of a nuclear missile, right? These other places, you can bear arms as much as you want to bear arms.
Sure.
New York and California and Washington state, these are the most restrictive gun laws in the world.
Right.
And they were the most locked down states in the union. There is a correlation there. You cannot walk into Alabama and take a man's freedom.
Who is running those governments?
Democrats, just happens to be.
Right.
Right.
And you don't think that's a correlation?
That Democrats bring heavy gun restriction?
No, the Democrats decided to have a stronger defense of COVID.
Oh, I think absolutely that's a thing.
That it had very little to do with guns. It had to do with politics.
No, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree.
It was a political decision. Conservatives were saying it was a joke and it wasn't real. And liberals, Democrats, had decided that they would follow the science or whatever they decided the science was.
But like, it's pretty hard to look back now and be like, the science was the science.
That's what you're asking me to do. Wait a second. That's what you're asking me to do. You can't have both things. You can't say we can't look back now and we're talking about science and we're talking about the Democrats that ran the cities that you brought up. The Democrats decided, states. The Democrats decided because they were the ones that ran it. Had nothing to do with guns. At no point were guns even brought up. At no point did anyone say anything like that. I believe that it was politics.
Who would be saying that? Do you think that the Democrat Party would be going, hey, we are able to implement these laws because, hey, wait, we took all their guns away? Like that's the talking point you think that the Democrats would come out with?
No, because that's
of course that nobody's saying that.
It had nothing to do with it. Because it had nothing to do with it. It was a Democratic decision because they decided as a Democrat Party to follow the science and listen to the people that I don't know, spent years and years and years studying different things.
No, but like, okay, so with that being said,
specifically studying different things,
but
specifically
with that
knowing.
being said, the science changed exactly how many times through this process?
The science changed as the corona was more learned about it. They reacted.
So
to
you
what
believe
they
you believe
first
that
knew.
COVID was well managed across the United States and Canada?
COVID was not well managed anywhere. For one
Right.
thing, we didn't know how to react at first. It was a new virus that people weren't aware how to deal with it. So then they came out with what their best idea was. And that's what we do. When we deal with anything, we come up with what we already know. Well,
So
we
you,
know
but see,
that
that's
we
a
do
talking.
this, and this.
But see, that's
Normally
a
for most
talking
viruses,
point.
because
But
those
that's
are
a
the
talking
viruses
point that
we've been
goes.
dealing with.
But that's a talking point from ignorance, because we did know and do know what COVID viruses were. We didn't know what the 19 one was.
We didn't know what this one was going to do. We did know COVID viruses and what most COVID viruses are due to people's bodies and how they affect them and how they enter our systems. This one was different. This one was slightly different. So as we were growing, as we were learning, as they were testing, as they were seeing people in the hospitals, because before we saw people in hospitals, we were dealing with science from other countries. We had to go by what the science from the other countries was saying because we had no relevant information here. So as we did have relevant information and our scientists got involved, they taught us more. And then they came in and said, you know what? We were wrong. Well, they never said that, but they should have. We were wrong. And
so that government that was wrong, right?
Yeah,
but that government that was wrong.
If you had a government that said that you were wrong, at what point would you stop listening to them? They had to keep rolling.
Long
they
ago.
had to keep rolling. Now,
but that's so wrong, because they did way more damage.
We're hearing that they're doing
in pretending.
Wrong.
Yeah, but that pal,
they did what they needed to do, so they didn't have mad panic in the streets.
No, that was initially. Well, they did. They feared about toilet paper, and everyone laughed at Donald Trump when he came out and said, "Nah, relax, folks. Everything's gonna be fine. Everything's gonna be fine." They called him a murderer. That he should have done more with COVID. And I don't disagree that he probably should have handled it better.
Should have done more with COVID.
No, but hang on.
I don't think he's a murderer by any means. I think that he made decisions that he made. But
that was the liberal talking
should have
point,
done
that he's
more about COVID.
Well,
that
but his you can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. Fear in the streets, people are going to panic. They're going to run for toilet paper. That's what he was handling, right? Right, wrong, or indifferent, whether you like him or not. That's what he was dealing with. Okay. Then we went into hysteria, where we're going to lock down the entire country.
When someone, I know myself, when you have a group of children, when you have a group of adults that are in a panic mode, you need a leader to make decisions. It doesn't matter what the hell those decisions are. You need a leader to make decisions so you can take a breath and go, okay, we made some decisions. Now we need to move on to the next thing, where we can decide on fact.
But that's where we had
on proof.
But that's where we had a segmented nation.
Reaction was, I don't know what to do, so this is what we're going to do.
See, and I would argue that we had a segmented society, because the media at the time was so fear porn driven.
Well, see, you and I would agree on the media. I think the media, like
100%.
If we were going to say something mishandled this whole event and made it worse and should be on criminal charges, it's the media. I 100% agree. We're getting a little off topic here. Sorry, we do this.
Guns,
but gun control. Anyway, I don't believe, and I'll never believe, that we shouldn't monitor where the guns are, who has the guns. I don't believe that we shouldn't. If someone walks in, we should at least be able to look into their background. We should at least be able to see whether or not they have had any criminal offenses, whether they committed a crime, who they are, and what they might do with a gun. And before we sell it to them, I'm not saying don't have guns. I personally will never have a gun. I've tried hunting because I had a brother-in-law that liked to hunt, but
liberals.
I will never hunt. I couldn't do it, but I don't care if other people have guns. I just want to make sure it's the guns.
That guy up the wall is mine. That guy on the wall is mine.
Yeah, you did take him down, eh? With the Oculus and everything. It was probably because he was wearing the Oculus that you took it down.
Hard to fit, really. Yeah. I don't know if you guys can see it or not. We'll have to throw it up here with there's some editing on this one.
I just looked at it, so I'll pop it up when I edit.
Perfect.
But, yeah, anyway, that's my belief. And like, I think we had a really good conversation about it. Got a little off topic. I kind of see what you're saying about if that the COVID areas maybe were less. I just don't think that you can blanketly say it's because people had guns. I think it's a political push, but that's my opinion, and that's all we're doing here, is sitting at the dinner table here talking about what we feel is happening. Like, it's just what it is. It's an opinion, and this is what we're trying to drive. Everyone's right has a right to have an opinion. This guy right
even
here,
liberals,
he's wrong,
right?
And he's a conservative,
right?
It's okay. You know what? I still love him like a brother. I'll love him forever because he's a good man, and I know he's going to be a good thing. We just have to get back to sharing opinions.
100%. And I couldn't agree with you more. My take is who do you trust to make the decisions that this person can, this person can't, what political ideology can, what political ideology can't. When you've been called a fringe minority by your government, you get your back up a little bit, and you're a little less trusting. And as a conservative, I don't believe that the government should have a very limited role. I don't believe that they should be dictating what we teach in schools. I don't think that they should dictate, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of those sorts of things. That comes down to that man's decision and my decision and your decision at home. So again, thank you folks for joining us at Soaring Profits, talking about all the interesting stuff today. Again, we've had some videos today, a little intro about James, a little intro about myself outside of the metaverse. Now we're back in here. Like, share, and subscribe. Check us out. Follow us. Send us to somebody that you think would find us interesting. It's kind of a unique thing. We're at the cottage today, by the way.
Yeah, we're at the cottage. I thought the cottage would be fitting. That's why I picked the cottage today. I thought, there's no gun rack, though. Who made this?
We'll have to get that going. Yeah. Again, folks, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm James. This is Pat, and we can't wait to see you again. Let me tell you, if you have an opinion on this, write it in the comments section. We like to hear all comments. And have a wonderful liberal day. Ones.
Thanks, guys. Take care. Hey, folks. Thanks again for joining us at Soaring Profits. Patrick and James, please like, subscribe, and share. And
follow us on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and of course, Facebook. And let's start a dinner table discussion right on this page right here. Let's start talking about the topics that we're talking about today.
Thanks again, folks. Appreciate it.